Hey Cara, thank you so much for taking time out and coming on this series. I'm so excited for our conversation.
So am I. I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. My first question would be that you spent a decade at Expedia. Most PMMs have never had to sell to two completely different buyers at once. What breaks first when you try?
Well, we actually had on the B so I was on the B2B side at Expedia, and we actually had 3 core audiences and then segments within those, of course. We had suppliers, so think about hotels, airlines, those sorts of things. We were really selling to them to try to get our inventory into Expedia. We also had, our B2B audience that takes our technology and inventory and sells travel on their own site. So most of those were OTAs, but we also had um, corporate travel programs. We had loyalty programs and things like that. And then the third was our travel agent base. And so the team I was leading was about 34 people. So luckily, I had a big enough team where I was able to segment the team in terms of audience. And so for them, it really became, how does that audience interact? How do they digest the information? And so some of those audiences, like the travel agent audience, was very product led. And so we did have a sales team, but it was much more within the product itself. And then the other two segments, the suppliers and the OTAs, were much more sales led. And so I think what breaks is if you don't understand the best way to communicate with your audience, then you might have all the right messaging and all the right positioning, um, but you're not communicating in a way that resonates. And so I think that's the biggest thing when you are thinking about multiple audiences is really understand where they interact and how they interact.
Totally, I agree with what you say. And especially, I think even you come from an account management background, and so do I. So I'm able to resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that we talked about this earlier, but I think that
Yeah.
experience really helps because you get to hear it firsthand from the customer. One of the things I find on the sales side is that it's very common for the sales team to come to product marketing or to product and say, I need X solution. But really what you need to dig into is like, what is the problem? Like, what are you actually trying to solve for? And I feel like when you're on the sales side, you hear that more, right? You hear the actual complaint, the challenge, the problem, or the opportunity from the customer itself. And it's really important if you're an account manager or product marketing to make sure that that translation is right when you're passing on the information.
So between launches exists because you noticed something nobody was talking about. So what's actually happening to a GTM team in the silence, between actual launches?
Yeah, so between launches, just to let the audience know, is a community I created that is Director Plus. There's lots of different titles within product marketing, so there's some principles and things like that in there as well. But the goal is for people that are managing teams. When I was at Expedia, you get so high within an organization that you're kind of one of maybe one other person in your particular role. I wanted to really understand what other companies were doing. And so I started reaching out one on one to people and we started sharing best practices, but it wasn't really scalable. And so, in August of last year, I created Between Launches, which is a community for those leaders to really come together, share their experiences, talk through problems. I typically have a speaker come in and join each session, and then we, talk about that specific topic. And sometimes we go off on other topics. But the thing I find is, we all want to understand what's working well, what's not working well. And I feel like the more you can share, the better. And we have quite a few people registered. I think we have about 150 people registered, but we usually get about 20 to 30 people on each of the calls, which is really good. I'm not necessarily, I mean, I'd love for anyone to be able to join, but my goal right now is not necessarily to grow. It's really more about how can we have these really great conversations to expose potential solutions to problems that we might be seeing as well.
That's nice. That actually brings me to my third question that most companies treat customer feedback like a suggestion box. So what does it look like when a team actually uses it to make decisions?
One of the things I've been working on with one of the clients I have now is bringing all the voice of the customer into one spot. So, you have many different channels where you're getting customer feedback. Some of it is if you're a marketplace, some of it is in reviews, a lot there's NPS, there's CSAT. Especially important now is what's coming through in LLMs and SEO. And so it's really, I think, if you're just sharing out those um, findings disparately, then it becomes a lot of noise. You don't really know where to point your teams to. And so, one of the things I did just recently is, pull that all together, created a scorecard with more, it provides more direction, and then pulled up the biggest I wanna say deflectors, but that's more of an NPS term, but the biggest problem pain points, so we can then work it into OKRs. And I think if you don't have so let me take a step back. When I was at Expedia, early on, oftentimes we would hear a complaint or a challenge from a particular customer, often a big customer. This is, more in that kind of enterprise type of space. And then we would go build it and product marketing would try to launch it, but then we wouldn't get the adoption at the end. And it was because there was really only a handful of people that needed that particular solution, right? And so it worked really well for the ones that needed it, but the others it didn't. And so one of the things that you can do when you have customer data is pull it forward. And if you can integrate it into the OKR process with your product teams, with your customer service teams, and your marketing teams, that's really where you start to drive a lot of impact, right? Because you can make sure that you're focused on building the right things.
Customer feedback is so important. I mean, you would definitely resonate with that since you come from travel, from a travel industry.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, that
Yeah.
is, I would say, especially coming from account management, that's one area that I'm very passionate
Yes.
about. And what led me to this role is how do we get that right for the customer? And also, I think from my Costco background, if you're familiar with Costco,
Yeah.
Costco's very customer centric, and so I feel
Yes.
starting out my career there, it really ingrained that within my DNA.
So you've worked with seed stage founders and scaled platform teams. What's the one thing that, the big companies get wrong and what the scrappy founder gets right, according to you?
I think it's all across the board. I would say the one common theme, in my opinion, that works well at more scale ups is speed of decision making. I feel like you can have a lot of layers within a much larger organization. And so to get something out, it becomes a big churn in terms of like, are we getting this right? A lot of big companies are really great at testing and learning, but sometimes it's getting to the point of what are we going to test and learn. So I think I wouldn't say that all scale ups and startups do this right. But I would say that speed and decision making is definitely one. And I would also say, and this might be more dependent on the company itself versus the size, but really ensuring you're bringing it back to the customer. I think when you think about organizations, our goal is typically to drive revenue or increase conversion. There's a particular metric there that you're aiming for. And sometimes that can conflict with what is actually good for the customer. And so, how do you really balance those two things? You want to make sure that you're driving a big impact for the organization. And at the end of that day, that's what we're all here to do. But how do we do it in a way that balances the needs of our customers? I think that needs to be ingrained in every organization.
Yeah, I think unlearning is also so important.
Yeah.
Like, the more you can unlearn faster, the more you can learn about how to move ahead faster.
Yes, for sure.
Yes. So we're doing something new this season. It's called Hot Take or Hard Truth. So I'm going to put across a few statements at you, and you're going to tell me if it's a hot take, like would people push back on it, or is it a hard take? Like, would is it something that people don't want to hear out aloud?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Let's get into it. So the first one is ask your top sales rep why they changed the deck. That one question tells you more about your messaging than any customer research report ever will. Hot take or hard truth?
I would say hot take. This is actually came up in one of the between launches call, I think the last one or maybe the one before that in terms of thinking about messaging. Product marketing can sometimes work in silos. I think I always recommend when I'm managing a team or within an organization is, make sure that you're sitting with your sales reps. If you, I mean, it'd be better to even be sitting with your customers to really hear it from their own point of view, but sitting with your sales reps if, that's not an option. And so I think that is definitely something that it resonates. The only call out that I would have here is I think it depends on whether your organization or audience is sales led versus product led. If it's product led, I would not say that's a hot take because you don't really, your sales team might be more of a customer service team or reactive. But I think if it's sales led, you know, product marketers often complain about, I spent all this time putting together the deck and then it's not being used. And that's not valuable, right? And so, one of the things that um, many different leaders do from, in my discussions, but I also did at Expedia is had what I called sales champions. And so, don't wait until the deck is complete and then have them use it, see it if it's working. It's like bring them in early as you're creating your messaging and your framework for the deck to make sure that it's going to resonate because they can give you a lot of, the sales team can give you a lot of insight into what's going to work and what's not.
That's such great piece of advice that get it on early
Yeah,
rather
for sure.
than waiting. So, second one is that most companies launch and walk away. The real GTM work starts the day after launch and almost nobody is doing it. Is it a hot take or a hard truth?
Hot take. So I'm pretty passionate about this one as well. And it becomes challenging based on resource and what your organization is working on. I feel like, many organizations are just strapped for resources, especially within product marketing. And so it becomes like, let's get this launch out the door. Let's move on to the next launch. And I think some of the challenge with that, I mean, it's a good idea, but I think some of the challenge with that is that customers don't hear things one time and fully digest it, right? You need to hear it multiple times. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be the product marketer, but as long as we have channels that continue to push that message, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a one off message, it could be repackage into an overall value proposition. And so it's just finding ways to incorporate that to make sure that you're driving the adoption that you're looking to get, which I think is another important piece. Not that you necessarily ask for it, but before you go into any launch, you really need to have a set of success metrics. Like what is success? And so if you do your go to market, you do all of your channels that you're looking to, and you haven't reached that, what are other ways that you can go about doing that?
Awesome. So the third one, I think I know your answer before I even ask you about this. Because coming from the same industry, I think I know what you'll be picking. So the third the third one is that AI will never replace the PMM who stays closest to the customer, but it will absolutely replace the one who doesn't. Hot take or hard truth?
Yeah, this one's a tough one. I think it's a hot take, but I think there's a hard truth behind it. So, yes, staying close to the customer, staying close to the audience that you're after is in my mind one of the most important things with product marketing. I think when it comes to AI, there's also a level of efficiency that it brings. But with that efficiency can be a degradation of quality, right? And so I think that PMMs that are not using AI to speed up their processes are going to, be left behind because we really are at the age where speed, matters. However, we cannot let that hinder the quality. And you may have seen some of my posts on this on LinkedIn, but I
Yeah.
really feel that I use AI every day. I think it's a really great tool. But I also feel like you need the human element behind it, right? The thing about AI is like it always tells you what you want to hear, right? It always tells you like what you're doing. Oh, this is so great. And so you need to go in. whether you're building a process, whether you're building messaging, you really need to go in with a clear strategy of what you want to do and feed that into the AI. And then you make sure to not read, but make sure to iterate on that. Because I think that combination of efficiency and quality is really driven by the combination of AI and the human element.
Awesome. I think what you said is completely amazing that AI will only tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
But
I know. I
yeah,
always tell me I'm so great. And I think about it. I'm like, I am.
I feel like wow, I did something nice. AI is telling me, oh my God, wow.
As we use AI, especially for when it comes to messaging, there's you only get as good out of it as you put into it, right? And then you also have to go back and refine. But I feel like in the age of AI, things are starting to feel a lot more similar. It also reminds me of, in B2B SaaS, uh, there was a lot of use of buzzwords, right? Like driving more efficiency or optimizing or maximizing. Like I always try to like not use those particular terms in my messaging because at the end of the day, I feel like people are people and they want to interact with something that's going to resonate at a human level. And when you're putting too many buzzwords in it or you're using AI that is adding a lot of fluff, it's just not the right messaging.
Totally. So thank you so much, Cara. This was so amazing to have a chat with you and it was so raw and unfiltered. I really liked it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been
Yes.
great. I just love one thing I love about the product marketing community is that everyone is so open to sharing. And again, that's why I created the Between Launches. Is that I feel like there's a lot of different avenues to do sharing and engaging at an IC level, but it's really like how do we up level that to make sure that we as leaders are also doing things that can make our teams more efficient and at the end of the day drive more impact.
Totally.